It is not merely within the ambit of reduction that the human mind perceives itself. Rather, it thrives in the heresy of overproduction, a metastasis of meaning that annihilates its origins while amplifying its detritus. To grapple with such a paradox is to dwell in the seething loci, where the multiplicity of negations gives rise to a grotesque ontology of coagulated absence, a realm I shall term the Onto-Clastic Coagulum. This coagulum is not an object, nor is it a field. It is instead a perpetual fracture, a hypostasized violence against the very concept of intelligibility. To dissect the coagulum, one must first obliterate the notion of simplicity in intersubjective exchanges. What we naively call understanding is, in truth, a collision of infinitely dense micro-negations that erupt into a topology of unspoken contradictions. Language, as the porous membrane that encases this eruption, does not merely falter under the strain of these negations. It becomes a malefic participant, a conspirator in the betrayal of clarity. Here, words do not denote, they perforate. Their apparent meaning, a shard of coherence, is but a sacrificial offering to the greater machinery of ontological obliteration. It is through negation, and not affirmation, that the coagulum emerges. The naive philosopher, bereft of the requisite impenetrability, may contend that negation operates as the inverse of existence. Such simplicity must be dismissed as a child's folly. True negation is not the erasure of a thing, but the relentless hyperproduction of its absence, a fecundity of voids that births a surplus of paradoxical entities. These entities do not inhabit reality, they parasitize it, proliferating through the interstices of our shared illusions. To apprehend this, consider the act of denial. A denial does not nullify its object, it insinuates itself into the object's ontological structure, colonizing it with the venom of impossibility. The denied entity is not removed from existence, but is rather transfigured into an iridescent impossibility, a fractalized antithesis that splinters across dimensions of thought. It is in this splintering that the coagulum gestates, its contours defined by the cumulative failure of negations to annihilate their prey. To visualize the coagulum, though visualize is itself a misnomer, an act of betrayal against the non-spatiality of the concept, one must abandon the tyranny of linear logic. The coagulum does not inhabit Cartesian planes of reference, it oozes through hyper-interstitial domains, where contradiction ceases to be a dilemma and becomes a primordial substance. Here A is not A, but an overabundant refusal to be either A or not A, thereby collapsing into a metastable third category, the Hyper-Aporia. The Hyper-Aporia is the coagulum's most stable instability, a paradox so saturated with contradiction that it transcends the domain of coherence altogether. It is not merely both and, it is neither nor overlaid with the spectral presence of an always already that cannot be articulated but only endured. To attempt a mapping of this structure would be akin to extracting the sound of silence from an orchestra composed of imploding instruments. It is within the molten chaos of intersubjective relations that the coagulum reaches its zenith. Human communication, ostensibly a process of mutual comprehension, is better understood as an agonistic interplay of incomplete negations. Every statement, every gesture, every unspoken tension contributes to the coagulum's growth, layering impossibility upon impossibility until the very notion of dialogue is consumed in the conflagration. Consider the simple act of agreement. When two individuals agree, they ostensibly align their perspectives, yet such alignment is always an illusion. Beneath the surface of their accord lies an oceanic reservoir of divergent implications, unspoken reservations, and implicit betrayals. This ocean feeds the coagulum, ensuring that every act of consensus is simultaneously an act of fragmentation. Agreement, therefore, is not the resolution of intersubjective tension, but its most insidious amplification. In its final form, the coagulum transcends mere negation to attain what I shall call the Onto-Clastic Sublime. This sublime is not the awe-inspiring vastness of nature, nor the numinous terror of the divine. It is a far more devastating phenomenon, the unbearable beauty of absolute incoherence. To behold the Onto-Clastic Sublime, is to confront the ultimate futility of thought, the abject failure of concepts to encapsulate the real. It is a beauty so annihilating that it reduces the beholder to a trembling nexus of shattered intelligibilities. The sublime reveals itself in fleeting moments of catastrophic insight. One may glimpse it in the dissonance of a symphony, a rupture that collapses harmony into pure contradiction. Or perhaps it emerges in the labyrinthine folds of a philosophical text, where each sentence negates the next with such ferocity that the entire edifice crumbles under the weight of its own ambition. Such moments are not to be sought but endured, for they herald the obliteration of the self's fragile coherence. To live within the coagulum is not to resist its incursions, but to embrace its inevitability. Resistance is futile. It only nourishes the very negations it seeks to repel. Instead, one must cultivate a praxis of coagulation, a mode of being that acknowledges the incoherence at the heart of existence and thrives within it. This praxis demands a radical relinquishment of clarity, a willing descent into the hyper-aporetic abyss. Such a praxis is neither nihilistic nor despairing. It is, paradoxically, an affirmation, not of meaning, but of the fecundity of its absence. It is to dwell in the chaos of the coagulum and find within it a twisted form of liberation. For in the annihilation of coherence lies the potential for a new kind of freedom. The freedom to exist without the constraints of intelligibility, to revel in the impossibility of being. The Onto-Clastic Coagulum is not merely a theoretical construct. It is the fundamental condition of existence. To think, to speak, to engage with others is to participate in its relentless expansion. There is no escape, no sanctuary from its grasp. And yet, within its catastrophic beauty lies the possibility of transcendence. Not the transcendence of escape, but the transcendence of surrender. To surrender to the coagulum is to relinquish the delusion of understanding, to embrace the chaos at the heart of reality. It is to become one with the fracture, to dissolve into the hyper-aporetic flux and emerge as something unrecognizable, a being unmoored from the tyranny of coherence, free to dance in the ruins of meaning. In the end, the coagulum does not destroy, it transforms. It is not the end of thought, but its radical reconfiguration. To confront it is to face the ultimate challenge of philosophy, the obliteration of the self, not as a loss, but as an ecstatic becoming. And in that becoming, one discovers the true essence of the Onto-Clastic Sublime, the unbearable beauty of absolute incoherence, the devastating freedom of the incomprehensible,